It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Juan Soto will play baseball in 2025 for the New York Mets. Let that all sink in as we welcome you into another edition of Rico Brogna. Very different edition of the Rico than the one we did on Sunday night into Monday morning. It turned into a Rico Juan Soto wait party. And then Juan Soto said, wait no more. As the decision was made to sign with the New York Mets, it has been almost 24 hours. And on this edition of the Rico Brogna, we will talk more about Juan Soto, how he fits into this Met lineup on this Met roster. We will start to look ahead to what's next. Now, a couple of things. David Stearns met the media, as did Carlos Mendoza, during day one of the winter meetings. One thing I've enjoyed doing, and we will do it again, and we've done this throughout the offseason, did a little bit last year as well, is we listen to an entire David Stearns press conference, and then we pause it and react to basically everything he said. He met the media for about 15 minutes on Monday, day one of the winter meetings. Hoff and I basically decided we're going to wait till the winter meetings are over, and then we will do a giant listening of David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza, pick out the things that are interesting, because David met the media on Monday and could not confirm what we all want to talk about. Could not confirm that the Mets had signed Juan Soto. Ironically enough, Brian Cashman met the media. He also did an interview on the Yes Network on their Yankee Hot Stove show, and he did confirm that Juan Soto is going to play for the New York Mets. So we did get confirmation from a New York general manager, just not from David Stearns. Now, David did talk a lot about things that I think the diehard Ricoer and Met fans would be interested in, such as Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio's health, obviously the pursuit of starting pitchers and how aggressive they'll be, Pete Alonso. So there's certainly a lot of interesting things, but we'll do it after the winter meetings. We'll kind of analyze everything he had to say, especially on some of the kind of inner details of some of their plans going into spring training. But as we sit here today, 24 hours after the decision, I have certainly felt this way all day. I don't know if you felt this way, Hoff. I've kind of been in this cloud of not fully comprehending that the New York Mets, the team we love so much, the team that gives us so much pain, actually pulled this off. Like, this has been a very, I got to pinch myself kind of day where I got to repeat to myself, holy crap, Juan Soto's going to play for the New York Mets this year. Oh, my God.
Yeah. No, I don't. Until I actually see him like at a presser with the jersey, I'm still like, there's a little like, not saying pessimistic inside of me, like, oh, what could go wrong? But like, yeah, it hasn't fully clicked yet that we have one of the best hitters in baseball playing for us. Like, that is a dream come true.
Well, there's a couple of things that have gone through my mind. One of which, and I want to caution you, it's different. I don't want you to think this is going to lead to a bad place or a negative place. The last time I was this excited about a free agent signing was June 30th, 2019, when the Nets signed Kevin Durant. And I caught myself on WFAN today or yesterday, depending on when you're listening, actually uttering the same phrase I uttered to Joe Beningo on that day that I said today to Tiki Barber. And that was, who's laughing now? And I didn't do it on purpose, but it just kind of came out because I think a part of my emotion on that night 5 years ago was not just that my basketball team signed a great player, but no one thought he would sign there. No one thought he would go to the Sisters of the Poor Brooklyn Nets. And so a part of my joy wasn't just getting a great player, but was saying, it's no longer funny. Crap ain't funny anymore. Who's laughing now? And I had that same emotion on Monday because I think a lot of us kind of felt over the last few months that Yankee fans laughed at us. The idea that a great player, a guy that led the Yankees to the World Series, would actually leave and sign with the New York Mets. And coincidentally, without thinking about it, I said, who's laughing now? And I quickly had this flashback to Kevin Durant. But there's a lot of things that are very different and a lot of things that give me more hope and optimism. When they signed Kevin Durant off a torn Achilles, they signed a veteran player who probably still had some good years left in him, but was more past his prime, off an injury with a very small window. I think part of the excitement of Juan Soto is not that the Mets aren't going to have pressure to win the World Series this year, because they will. We'll spend more time talking about that today and throughout the next bunch of Ricos. Yeah, the bar is a lot higher now. There's no doubt about that. No one's going to set up any excuses. But Juan Soto's 26 years old. He's not coming off a torn Achilles. There isn't this brief window and moment in time of, yes, we have the great player, but man, we gotta take advantage of this right now. Now, that doesn't mean there shouldn't be an urgency and the Mets shouldn't be trying to win as hard as they can, but he's 26 years old. And a part of why I was not afraid of giving Juan Soto a 15-year contract is that in my estimation, I think he's got 10 more great years in him. I really feel that way because I think as an offensive player, as a hitter, and that's why he got paid. He didn't get paid because we think he's Roberto Clemente. We know he's not. Now, he may not be the butcher that some Yankee fans are describing, but obviously, the Mets didn't sign him for his defense. They didn't sign him for his base running. They signed him because he has an eye that's maybe as good as we've ever seen, because he's got pop, because he's a brilliant hitter, because he is right now, and I don't think there's any debating this, one of the 5 best players in baseball and probably one of the 3 best players in baseball. It's probably Ohtani, Judge, and Juan Soto. So I like, and what I feel so different about that pressure of 2019 was I felt like the Nets signed the guy and you knew you don't have a lot of time. Boy, you better take advantage of him. This guy's 26 years old. That's a part of why he was able to get 15 years. It's a part of why, to me, it was okay giving him $51 million a year. There's a large window to take advantage of this man's talent. Doesn't mean the Mets shouldn't be going balls to the wall in 2025, or I'm going to be okay with not winning a world championship this year, next year, or the year after that. But they have gotten themselves a great baseball player, a great all-time hitter, and they've done it with 10 good years, in my estimation, left. Maybe more. Maybe I'm shortchanging him. Maybe I'm overchanging him. I don't think I am. I think he could be a great offensive player till he's 36 years old. So any of those emotions that felt similar, and for the 7 people out there that had the same emotions because you happen to root for those 2 teams, it's very, very different. While he may be a mercenary, and I get it, he's our mercenary for a very long time, and I think we're going to see his greatness for a very long time.
Well, I mean, dude, he's not going to be like a rental. He's here. Like, unless he opts out in 5 years, like, he is a New York Met till he decides to hang him up. Like, that is, we're talking about Pete Alonso if he comes back, and we'll get to that more, but, like, if Pete Alonso comes back, he'll set the home run record. Juan Soto will set every record. I mean, he's going to be here for 15 years.
Well, he is, and I was thinking about this, and obviously he's got a lot to prove with us. We always say this about great players. It's wonderful, Max Scherzer, that you had a great career in Detroit and in Washington and briefly in LA, but it's what you do here. Roberto Alomar, you're a great player. Congratulations on what you did in Toronto and Cleveland. It's what you do here. So obviously Juan Soto's going to have to perform here, but he walks in as the greatest position player the Mets have ever seen. And I'm excluding Willie Mays because he was really at the end of his career. I'm talking about prime of your career position player. He's better than Darryl Strawberry ever was. He's better than David Wright ever was. He's better than Mike Piazza ever was, though Mike was very, very good. He's better than Keith Hernandez ever was. And I had a friend of mine who's a Yankee fan kind of mock that and say, what does that mean? Because your organization's got this garbage history for 62 years, you're pumping him up as the greatest position player of all time. And I'm like, well, first of all, that's my team's history. We know it isn't the greatest. We know they're not the New York Yankees, but the facts are the facts. Like, Juan Soto walks in here and has a chance, if he continues to replicate what he's done over the first 6 years of his career, to be the greatest position player by a lot. Like, he's better than Carlos Beltran. He's better than all of those guys. So to get him in the prime of his career is simply electric. Now, you mentioned the opt-outs. Let's explain this opt-out thing real quick, because yesterday, as we were doing the Juan Soto wait party and then the Juan Soto's a Met, holy crap, you're digesting things, but you're not fully digesting things. This is a Fugazi opt-out. This is not a real opt-out. This is after 5 years, which is a long time. I mean, 5 freaking years we're talking about. We're going to have another presidential election by that point. I mean, that's a long time from now. But 5 years from now, after his age 31 season, so this is 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Actually, after his age 30 season, that's why I counted it out to be accurate. Going into his age 31 season, Soto can opt out. The Mets then have an opportunity to override the opt-out, very similar to what Garrett Cole had, and just tack on a $4 million raise per season. And if they do that, then Juan Soto is locked in for the remaining 10 years of his contract. So think about it this way. Juan Soto has just signed a 5-year, $255 million contract. Okay? $51 million a year, 5 years, $255. After 5 years, he has the option. Do I just stick with the final 10 years, $510 million left on my contract? Or do I dare the Mets to throw in that raise to make it a 10-year, $540 million contract? At 31 years old, as great as he is, I don't know if he's getting 10 years, 540. So it's very possible the Juan Soto opt-out exercised is like the Garrett Cole opt-out. Now, Garrett Cole is still a great player. He is still an ace in my mind. I would want Garrett Cole on my team. But once Garrett Cole and Scott Boras exercised that opt-out, and the Yankees said, yeah, we dare you, good luck with that, I think Boras and Cole realized, I don't think we're getting that. And so I don't know what the market's going to be like in 5 years. I have no idea. Obviously, we hope Soto is still playing at a very high level. But even if he's at a high level, I'm not guaranteeing he's getting 10 years, 540. So he may end up sticking with the 10 years, 510, and then it is the contract that's been reported, 765, $51 million a year. I don't necessarily think it's a guarantee that he opts out, the Mets override it, and now all of a sudden it is that $800 million contract it can become.
Well, he's almost having to bet on himself again in the next 5 years. Like in the next 5 years, he's going to have to go out there and prove he's better than that contract, better than the 765. And listen, we've seen that before. Players have done that. Ohtani did that. But the likelihood is he probably won't. Like we've as Met fans, we've seen it's tough to live up to the contract.
Well, here's really the point I get out of this. He's not going to be a free agent in 5 years. One of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to be freaking awesome, and the Mets are just going to override the opt-out the way we thought the Yankees would with Garrett Cole. And so, yes, it's an $800 million contract, or at least it becomes that. Or Boras is going to see the market. Doesn't mean Soto's been bad, by the way. He's going to see the market and say, there's no way we're topping this. And the only person that would top it is Steve Cohen. So if he says no and lets it get to free agency, there's no one else that's going to pay that. So my prediction, and this is definitely a long-term prediction for 5 years down the road, there's no way Soto opts out and the Mets don't override it. So he is a Met for life, is the long-winded point I'm getting to. Now, he also has a full no-trade clause. Not that the Mets are going to exercise any kind of trade. And he's a Met. And Juan Soto, after the odyssey of the last 3.5 years of going from Washington to San Diego to the Yankees, is now settled in as a Met. And here's the other thing. I don't know why this bothers me. And it really doesn't bother me because I'm happy, man. I don't give two craps about anything. They got Juan Soto, and I'm pumped up. This was the creme de creme of this offseason. The idea that certain Met fans and Yankee fans are going to fight with each other about why Juan Soto picked the New York Mets. And I blame Jeff Passan, because Jeff Passan, who's an excellent reporter, in his ESPN article says the money was comparable and Juan Soto preferred the Mets, basically picked the future of the Mets over the future of the Yankees. And that has triggered a lot of Yankee fans who are upset about it, saying, shut up, it's about the money. And it's gotten Met fans to say, see, you loser Yankee fans. Juan Soto didn't pick the Mets because of money. He picked the Mets because he believes in the team more than he believes in the New York Yankees. So I just want to chime in with this. First of all, who cares? Let's start off with who gives a rat's patoot why Juan Soto picked the New York Mets? Whether it's if it's going to make Yankee fans feel better to say, okay, he only did it because of the money. Okay, if that really makes you feel better, fine. If it's going to make Met fans feel better to concoct a story that he just preferred the song OMG and he preferred Citi Field and Steve Cohen's a cooler dude, fine, go with that story. I'm here to tell you that it doesn't matter. I didn't care why Beltran picked the Mets. I didn't care why I didn't care why Durant picked the Nets. I always had to hear, well, he wanted less pressure. And I'm like, okay, loser Knicks fans, if that's going to make you feel better that he just didn't want, okay, I don't care. I don't care why he picked them. So I don't care why Juan Soto picked the Mets, but this isn't a podcast for Yankee fans. This is a podcast for you as Met fans. So let's have an honest conversation real quick about this. He picked the Mets because of the money. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. That's nothing to be ashamed about. But the Mets offered more money than the New York Yankees. The Mets offered more money than the Boston Red Sox. And because of that opt-out and what it can become, even though we admit it may not ever happen, the Mets offered him significantly more money. The idea, it's the same. It's the same. The Mets offered $3 million a year more. And then if they pick up the opt-out right over, it becomes $7 million a year more. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And now we're hearing from some of the reporting that on Sunday morning, it looked like he was going to the Yankees. And then on Sunday night, he's going to the Mets. Well, why do you think that's the case? It's the case, to the credit of Steve Cohen, that Steve Cohen realized to get this done, he was going to have to make Juan Soto an offer he could not refuse. And I commend Steve Cohen for that. I thank Steve Cohen for that because that's what needed to happen. You know, we talked about this last year with Ohtani and Yamamoto. If you want to get a big-time free agent, if you want to get a game-changing free agent to come to us, the Mets, we don't have the history of the Yankees. We don't have the history of the LA Dodgers. We don't have that pedigree. Maybe we will someday. You have to spend the money. So just between us, the Met fans, I don't think Yankee fans are checking in on tonight's Rico. I think Yankee fans checked in on Sunday's Rico because they thought voyeuristically they were going to get to see me and Licata and Hoff and Positive Tommy die on a podcast. They thought, oh, God, he went back to the Yankees. They thought they were going to get us sad. But today, this is not about the Yankee. The Yankee fan ain't watching. Certainly today they're not. This is the Met fan. So between us, he came here for the money. He may never admit that, and that's okay. And don't be a hypocrite, because when Mike Hampton went to Colorado and we mocked him for the school systems, we knew why he went to Colorado, for the money. When Jacob deGrom went to Texas and half you guys mocked him, he went there for the money because the Rangers offered more money. That's business, baby. And that's what the Mets were able to do. And I commend Steve Cohen, and I remain very, very happy about this. We will start to look ahead to what's next, but let's read a lot of your Juan Soto emails and see where the Rico community is at 24 hours after the most important signing in the history of New York baseball. Let's start off with Leo Rosenstock, who writes, Juan Soto. I told you, Evan, I did not want Juan Soto here, but I feel better that he can opt out at age 31. He probably will, and hopefully the Mets will let him walk at that point. That makes the signing much better. Leon, I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. There is no scenario where he is literally going to opt out and the Mets are going to say okay, and he's going to be gone. Ian Nolan writes, I'd like to shout out Bernie Madoff. Without his Ponzi scheme, Juan Soto would not be a Met today. Bernie, you're the real MVP. Yeah, I don't want to co-sign that because Bernie Madoff hurt a lot of innocent people and a lot of families. But I understand that if you go on the long line of our franchise's history, if the Wilpons aren't involved to whatever level they were with Bernie Madoff, they probably still own the team. And if they still own the team, not only is Juan Soto not here, Francisco Lindor is not here. I don't know what this Met franchise looks like if the Wilpons still own the team. Casey writes, guys, this might be the most significant day in the history of the franchise. And what makes it even sweeter has been the reaction from all of my Yankee fan friends. All of a sudden, Juan Soto is either overrated, the one to blame for the Yankees not winning the World Series, or only a product of being in a lineup with Aaron Judge. You can't help but laugh. I have nothing really insightful to say about what this does for the Mets, as we'll have plenty of time to discuss that, what we'll do next, and how good we can be. Right now, just let's bask in the glory and drink those Yankee fan tears. Casey represents a lot of Met fans that kind of look at this as, I'm glad we got the player, but I really want to watch Yankee fans suffer. And by the way, I get that. I'm not necessarily sharing that with you, but I get that. To me, this was always the player that if you looked ahead 3 years ago, you fantasized about. You always looked at him and said, that's the guy. When you kind of look at the age and you look at his skill level and you look at the way he tortured us with the Washington Nationals, people forget that. I don't know how you can. I still got gray hairs from Juan Soto, but he was a killer for a while. If he was still a National, or if he was still a Padre, or if he had been traded to you name the team, to me, I'd still be this excited. But I understand that for guys like Casey, it's rubbing it in. Christopher writes, Soto sweet. Still numb. I just watched the live stream. A couple of thoughts popped into my head as we collectively drank Yankee tears. Number one, does this make it easier to offer Pete more money, less years contract to come back, or even Alex Bregman? More money, less years contract. Okay. Number two, why did he come? Is it because we have his brother? Is it Lindor? Is it Uncle Stevie? And number three, can we use Soto as a lure to convince Roki Sasaki to be our ace? Our window is now. This is from Mac. So I'll answer all three questions. Number one, I think that going big money, less years is preferable with a guy like Pete Alonso, because I think there's at least the fear and the questions of what he's going to be like 3 or 4 years from now. I think the Mets are also in this really cool spot where, because they had so much money come off the books, despite giving Juan Soto $51 million a year, they are way behind the payroll of a year ago. The Mets could conceivably re-sign Pete Alonso, add 2 starting pitchers and a reliever, and still actually have a payroll that's not as high as last year. I don't believe the Mets are spending all the way back to equal last year's payroll. So this may be a shock to the trolls and idiots out there that don't actually follow the Mets. Their payroll is likely to go down from last year, despite giving Juan Soto this ridiculous contract. I kid you not. I swear to God this happened. And I wasn't even mad. I was laughing. Forget the Yankees for a second. I got a text message from a Dodger fan who actually had the balls, or I guess it's the lack of understanding them, to mock the Soto contract and say, boy, that's crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. Let me just get this straight. You guys paid Shohei Ohtani, whether it's real money or a million years from now, $70 million a year. We all get that Shohei's really special, but most of us realize he's not going to pitch and hit every year of that contract. He already didn't in year one. It is unlikely that Ohtani is going to be Cy Young type pitcher, Hank Aaron Award type hitter in the same year every year. But okay, let's say I'm wrong. And he is. You decided to pay him monstrous money after he's retired. So laugh now and win titles now. God bless you. But in 30 years, you're still going to be paying this guy $50 million a year, and you're mocking us? I mean, have some understanding of what they are. I wasn't mad. I kind of laughed at it. Number two, why did he come? He came for the money, like I said, and that's totally fine. And number three, and I think this is a really good question, and it's one that could make this offseason even better. Can Juan Soto being here lure Roki Sasaki where money is not going to be a factor? He's literally just going to pick the place he wants to be. Would that make Sasaki say, I want to be a Met? So the thing about free agency, and we talked about this with Juan Soto, is we didn't know what he wanted. What does he want? Does he want to just win championships? Does he want to be the guy? which the Mets can certainly offer. So the same thing applies to Roki Sasaki as this young 24-year-old pitcher coming over from Japan. There is this assumption, and maybe it's true, that he's just going to join the Japanese super team known as the LA Dodgers. And if that happens, and nobody will be surprised, we will understand it. But isn't it possible that Roki Sasaki doesn't want to join the Japanese super team and says, I want to be an ace. I don't want to be the fourth starter. I want to be the guy. And one, I guess, appeal for him on this Met rotation would be they don't have an ace. Now, maybe Kodai Senga proves he's healthy and becomes the ace. Maybe David Peterson builds off of last year and he becomes the ace. But there's certainly more of an opening to be that guy. So I hope Christopher's right, and maybe it's just a fantasy, that all of a sudden Roki Sasaki looks at the Mets differently, especially with Juan Soto being here and the roster taking shape. They still have a lot of work to do. I don't want to say they're a loaded roster. Taking shape. Josh Griffith writes, the home opener is going to be electric. I can see it now. Francisco Lindor walks out of the dugout. My Girl plays over the loudspeaker. 33,000 Met fans sing along. First of all, 33,000. They better sell out that home opener. That ain't a sellout. And I think they will. 42,000 singing My Girl. Lindor smiles. He knows Queen still loves him. He smashes a ball to deep center field. It's still April, so it dies on the warning track. Boy, I'm afraid where this email is going, Josh. I like to read the emails for the first time on the Rico to give a more natural reaction, by the way. Juan Soto steps up to the plate. The crowd erupts. It's everything Met fans dreamt of. The Soto shuffle, the impeccable eye, the stardom. Steve Cohen watches from his box. People have been congratulating him all day. Soto works a beautiful 7-pitch walk. We're going to love those 7-pitch walks, let me tell you. Mark Vientos is up next. A respectable ovation. He's a budding star. He rips a double into the gap. The crowd erupts again. Can you believe this lineup? Evan Roberts says from the stands. Thank you for, I appreciate being in your story. Barely able to contain his excitement already, thinking about the World Series, Juan Soto, the slightly below average base runner, is held at third base. Next is a re-signed Pete Alonso. The crowd hasn't stopped roaring. The stadium is electric. Pete can't help himself. He tips his helmet as he walks to the plate and takes a pitch clock violation. Pete's a Met for life. It wasn't the contract he dreamt of, but he's where he wants to be, and the crowd loves him. Already down 0-1, he swings first pitch. He grounds into a tailor-made double play, inning over. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. What the? Wait a second. That was an amazing story until you end it with Pete bouncing into a double play. What the hell was that? But that was a fun story. Crowd singing Lindor. Now I'm starting to think Josh was trolling this entire email, especially when he said 30,000 people there on opening day. Nah, the Mets are going to be a hot ticket this year. At least that's what I think. The Mets did a great job of announcing, hey, single game tickets are on sale Monday at 10 a.m. The day after, while it isn't an official, they go out and they get Juan Soto. But yeah, that was a good email until it wasn't a good email. Thank you very much for it. Let's go to Thomas. Thomas writes, things change very, very quickly. 10 weeks ago to the day, Edwin Diaz blew a lead in the bottom of the 8th inning in the first game of the Atlanta doubleheader. We headed to the 9th inning thinking typical Mets, Atlanta House of Horrors, expect heartbreak, nothing ever changes. My oh my, have things changed in just 10 weeks. We still need that ring, but it's amazing how a lifetime of inadequacy and feeling like a second-class citizen can be washed away with a little playoff magic and stealing free agents from the New York Yankees. It's a brand new era, LFGM. It goes back to not just the doubleheader. It goes back to May. It goes back to where this season was going, how embarrassing things were, how bad it was. And look, the one thing we'll never know, though we could debate it for a very long time, it goes back to why Juan Soto was a New York Met. If the Mets season never turns around, if April and May is exactly what they were, and the Mets end up losing 87 games, and they sell off Severino at the trade deadline, and they sell off Minaya at the trade deadline, But the Mets still go into this offseason aggressive. And Steve Cohen still makes this offer to Juan Soto. Does Juan Soto say yes? Or does Juan Soto say, boy, I can't leave a team that just went to the World Series to that train wreck coming off back-to-back losing seasons? A part of me thinks, look, it's about the money. And if it's about the money, he was going to come here anyway. But there's always going to be that wonder of, if they didn't turn their season around, if they didn't march to the playoffs the way they did, if they didn't have the magic that 2024 was, does Juan Soto say no? Again, I think back to past examples. I think back to Pedro Martinez and Carlos Beltran. I think Carlos Beltran had a robust market. Pedro Martinez maybe a little bit less. But they came to New York for the money. The Mets weren't coming off a good season in 2004. It was a bad season. It was a couple of bad seasons in a row. So we'll never know. But to your point, things changed very, very quickly. I think as we all sat there just as fans back in May of 2024 to think that we would get the playoff run, the drama, the come-from-behind victories, sticking it to the city of Philadelphia in the division series, everything that went along with it, to top it all off with signing Juan Soto is incredible. In fact, and Pete, I'm curious your opinion on this. I put a poll out on Twitter, and I think it was yesterday. It had to have been yesterday because that's when the Mets signed Juan Soto. And I put a poll out, and you give me your answer, and I'll also give you the results. The question was very simple. Met fans, what has been the best moment of 2024? And I put 4 options. To me, they're the big 4 of 2024. Number 1, Lindor's grand slam against the Phillies essentially sent us to the LCS. Lindor's home run in game 161 against Atlanta sent us to the playoffs. Pete Alonso's home run against Milwaukee saving us after we were about to be eliminated against the Brewers. Or what we all experienced on Sunday night, Juan Soto signing with the New York Mets. How would you rank those 4 moments in order of amazingness or best moment of the year?
So I think we go the Lindor 161 4th, Lindor grand slam 3rd, Alonso 2nd, and then the Soto news number 1. And the reason why is because we won something. Like, no one else got the prize. We got it. No one else can touch it. It's ours. And now we could celebrate that for the next 15 years.
Here are the answers, by the way. Good ranking. You were right about what finished 4th. Lindor's home run in game 161 only got 8% of the vote, which I'm kind of surprised about because that was crazy. That's the greatest regular season home run in the history of the Mets besides Piazza 9/11. It's the surrealness of a Monday afternoon. You know, everybody's working. Maybe that's what kind of ruined it. Everybody's working, and you know, either you're consuming it via the radio, maybe you watched our live watch party that we did, or however you consumed it, but it only got 8% of the vote, finishing in a tie for second place. Lindor's grand slam with the Phillies, against the Phillies, and Juan Soto signing with the Mets at 27%. The winner at 38% was the Pete Alonso home run against the Brewers. And I agree with that. And I'm going to tell you why I agree with that. The Juan Soto signing is probably going to be the most impactful in terms of long-term because he's here for 15 years. He's a guy who's on our roster. So the signing of a player, especially if it works out, is clearly going to surpass everything because there may be moments that don't happen because of that. You know what I mean? Like, these are individual moments. They've happened. They occurred. We didn't win the World Series. Juan Soto could have us 15 moments, you know, in the next 10 years. But I think as I sit here right now, I agree with the Alonso home run because I got chills from that. Like, that home run made me physically move in a way that those other moments, as great as they were, didn't do. And maybe it was the shock of it. Like, Soto signing with the Mets is a shock, but there were rumors, there was hope. You were confident about it, Pete. When Alonso came up with the season basically dead, I mean, we thought of a home run, but who the hell actually thought he would do it? So I actually agree with social media where 38% said Pete Alonso home run against the Brewers.
I guess the signing of Soto is more of what's to come, right? Like, so the Pete Alonso moment was special. We haven't really had those moments, but the idea of what Soto's going to bring over the next 15 years, there's going to be moments like that. I don't know, I wouldn't say consistently, but you're going to think that a lot more of what happened in 2024 is going to happen. And I just can't wait. So maybe in the moment, it's not as you're not getting those goosebumps as much as the Pete Alonso home run. But just think about next year, him stepping up, first time at Citi Field. It's going to be electric.
No, it's going to be crazy.
The first time he does a Soto shuffle, the first time he grabs his crotch, the first time he hits a home run, it's going to be amazing.
Yes.
You know it.
No. I get it's so weird that they're opening in Houston, and that's where the Yankees opened last year. So Juan Soto is playing his first game as a Met in the same place he played his first game as a Yankee. And we know what happened in that game for the Yankees. He got the game-winning outfield assist pretty much. So who knows what'll happen on opening day in Houston. I just knock on wood that he's healthy. One of the best parts about Juan Soto is that he is healthy, that he goes out and he plays every day, and he adds to a team that has guys that do that. Francisco Lindor mostly does it, assuming Pete Alonso comes back, and I certainly hope he does. Pete Alonso does it. Brandon Nimmo goes out and plays a lot, and certainly Juan Soto's been one of those guys. Let me get to a few more of your emails. Fred writes, the Rico family. What really stood out to me about last night, he's talking about Sunday night, was the absolutely perfect timing of the announcement during a live Rico. I've listened to all 392 episodes, and this place has become a haven for the diehards. We're all in this together. We're all there for 162, regardless of how the team is doing. This one was for us. The fact that we're able to all experience this together made it much sweeter than simply refreshing Twitter and seeing it there. Evan and Pete, thank you for the years of free entertainment. This is just the beginning. That means a lot to us. We appreciate that. I'll take you behind the scenes of that Rico we did on Sunday night for those that missed it. Turned out to be a 2.5-hour Rico. But our plan was not to be on the entire night. Now, we called it a Juan Soto wait party, but I just meant, waiting on the decision. We're going to do an hour. I had Chris McGonigal on, who does overnights at FAN, so we got Yankee perspective, which we don't do very often, but in this case, it made sense. We threw Met-Yankee trades at each other, but our plan was not to be on all night. But when Pete Hoffman gave us an update early on in this edition of the Rico that said, hey, Andy Martino's reporting this is going to go down tonight, Pete and I sort of made eye contact with each other. We never texted. It was just like a look of, we're not going to stop the Rico. This is going to be an all-night affair. And I started to get nervous after the first hour and a half. I started thinking to myself, how long are we going to go? Like, are we really just going to what if this happens at 2 a.m.? We started it at about 8:30. Like, are we just going to go until it happens? And I think that's what we were going to do. But that was only because of Martino. I give Martino credit saying, hey, the expectation is this is getting done tonight. And then thankfully, Hoff did a great job. He had Sal Licata come on. He had Tommy Lugauer come on. We eventually got Sean Morash to come on after the decision was made. And fortunately, we were able to be all together, if you will, as the announcement went down, as we found out on Twitter. So if you were able to be watching us or listening to us live as it happened, that is very, very cool. And I'm glad you were a part of it because it was definitely a lot of fun.
How many times have you rewatched that out of curiosity? Because a lot of times, like, I'll listen back to the podcast. I'll listen back to certain clips. But I don't normally listen or go back to and watch one moment as many times as that because I'm overanalyzing everything now.
Yeah, I was overanalyzing how none of us knew that Sal told us Soto was coming to the Mets. Because the way he had said it, it was very strange for those that missed it. And the clip is circulating instead of you going through the entire episode. But basically, Positive Tommy came on, and I was mocking, Positive Tommy, great, something good's going to happen. And we thought, as Sal screamed Soto to the Mets, that he was just mocking Tommy. That's all I thought. So when Sal initially screamed that, and you could see it in the clip, I'm like, what was that? And then finally, he pauses and says, guys, Soto to the Mets. Andy Martino's saying it. That's not a great Sal imitation, but I'm trying here. And then I quickly got my phone out and said, what's going on? And I saw Heyman. And when I saw Heyman, Soto to Mets, in conjunction with Sal saying Martino, I knew not to check fake account. We got him. And so I was overanalyzing the delay of Sal saying it again, me saying don't F with us, and then all four of us going, we got him, like a bunch of crazy animals.
I love it. And dude, you know what though? But that's the passion that we have for this team so much. Like, I can't wait to win a championship. And that's honestly, you get Soto, and now like the floodgates are going to open up of what's next. I mean, there are so many options. That's where my mind goes to automatically. And I'm like, this is just going to be one of many times I feel this amazing.
Mark Gray wrote a poem. Would you like to hear a New York Mets related poem, Pete?
How long is it?
It's not long. It's actually very quick. Does that make it better for you?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Go for it.
It's titled Long Live the King. David slew Goliath tonight. The mighty giant fell. 60 years of bowing down and scraping in the well. Our generous king had enough and boldly screamed no more. He made his move, won the prize, and showed his enemies the door. Our king has many trophies, paintings, homes, a rare photo, but none are treasured and loved by all of us as our new Soto. You like that one?
I have to say that was awesome. that I got the feels on that.
Yes, that was a good one. That got me feels too. Kenneth writes, Merry Christmas. My secret fantasy is that Steve Cohen has called up Pete Alonso and said, Merry Christmas. Here are the terms of your new contract. I have a feeling that our debates that we had, not you and I, but me and you versus Met fans about Pete Alonso, I think that when you combine getting Soto, when you combine the conclusion of the season and how Pete played well in the postseason, like he actually ended up having not only the impactful moments like the home run against the Brewers, home runs against the Phillies, but just look at his overall numbers. He had a very good postseason. That I think most Met fans are now just on board. You got to keep Pete Alonso. Now, I don't think there's going to be a revolt if he's gone necessarily, because when you bring in a guy like Soto, even I will say, hey, I'm annoyed or it sucks, but you got Juan Soto. I'm going to be disappointed, but I think we've been calmed. But I think most people that were on the fence about giving him too much money or concerns about him or the core of the team not being good enough, I think that's gone. I think it's gone because Juan Soto is here. So I don't know how, unless I put out another Twitter poll, and I put out way too many over the last few days, but I do get the sense off that the Met fan is now fully on. We have to bring him back.
Yeah, I've seen a mix. I've seen the Alonso, but I've also seen the Carlos Correa. Go get Carlos Correa. Go. You know, that was the move that the Mets should have done too. And let's rewrite that wrong. And that would basically mean the end of Alonso, because then Vientos should go to first base. But I, personally speaking, I'm on board with you. Alonso is the guy. Like, it just makes too much sense.
Yeah, I think Pete is the best option of the real options that are out there right now. And I say real because I think one of the options that people talk about is Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and I'm not convinced it's a real option. I'm not convinced for a few reasons. Number one, are the Blue Jays trading him? The same Blue Jay team that was just bidding on Juan Soto? Are they really turning around and trading their 27-year-old star? Like, I just don't see it happening. And I also may not have the appetite to trade for him, considering he's a free agent at the end of the year. And considering if you want to sign Vlad Guerrero Jr., he's going to get paid. He's not getting a Soto contract, but I'll tell you this, he's not getting an Alonso contract. He's going to get a lot more than Pete. So I don't look at Vlad as necessarily a realistic option right now. I think the realistic options are Christian Walker. I think the realistic options are, trading for Nathaniel Lowe, like I pointed out in the trade for position player edition, things like that. And honestly, I think Pete's the best option. I like Alex Bregman too. I think Pete's a better option. I just do. Willie Adames luckily signed with San Francisco over the weekend, so we don't have to talk about him. But I think Pete's a better, I was about to burp. I blocked it. Pete's a better option. All right, this is a good one. Drew in Asbury Park has got a very different voice than most of us. Are you ready for this, Pete? I want to be excited. Evan, please help me feel excited about this. I want to, but we have been burned before. We've had stars come to the Mets and completely flop. I'm just flashing forward in my mind to 8 years down the line when we've won nothing. Juan Soto is completely broken down, and we have 7 more years of a Stanton-esque albatross of a contract. I know Juan Soto is different, but it's hard to put my guard down and just enjoy this. Is it okay to be happy? Please, Evan, please. Drew in Asbury Park. Pete, I'll let you start. Can you tell Drew why it's okay to be excited about Juan Soto?
Because this is the changing of the guard. This signifies that the Mets are the real deal, and we've seen it already in this past year. How your owner and your GM or your president of baseball operations, they're not going to sit around and will say, "Whoops, we made a mistake. We have to deal with it." They're going to be proactive to make sure they give us the best product every single year. So Juan Soto, first of all, being here is amazing in itself. He's not going to be in the prime of his, not even the prime yet. He hasn't even hit the prime of his career yet. He is going to be amazing. What he's done so far the first 6 years of his career, just imagine getting better. And then on top of that, if for some strange reason he turns into Jason Bay Part 2, Steve Cohen doesn't care. It was a mistake, and then we go get the next shiny toy.
Yeah, I think Steve Cohen has shown us, even with the Verlander and Scherzer mistakes, that he's not going to let a bad decision, if somehow this turns into a bad decision, he's not going to make him stop trying to improve the roster. So I think that's a great way to start. That I think the fear in the Wilpon years was when they actually would spend on those rare occasions, especially after the Madoff scandal, the fear would be that's it. That's their one spend. I'll never forget the comment that Jeff Wilpon made about pursuing Bryce Harper when he said, well, how many teams have multiple guys making $200 million? Like, it was already an excuse of, we've already done the spending. What are you guys asking for? And that's not going to happen here. So I agree. It's a great starting point. The second thing that's very different, and I don't know which star Drew is talking about, like which example of a guy coming here and failing he was thinking about, but I guess for me, one of the guys that jumps out is Roberto Alomar, because Roberto Alomar was a first ballot, no doubt about it, Hall of Famer, like truly one of the greatest second basemen of all time when we acquired him before the 2002 season. So I don't know if Drew's thinking of Robbie, but I think of Robbie. Roberto Alomar was 34 years old when the Mets acquired him. And maybe we should have known better. Maybe that's on us. Maybe that's on me as a 19-year-old who was like, Robbie Alomar, holy crap. He was 34. Maybe we should have known better. Maybe when Mo Vaughn walked through that door, we should have known better. Pedro Martinez, look, we knew the deal with Pedro Martinez. We knew maybe they'll get a good 2 years out of him. They got 1 good year out of him. I think in the case of a 26-year-old, look, it'd be a colossal failure if he flamed out after 5 years. It would. There's no denying that. But there's no evidence that would happen. And when you compare it to the other stars the Mets have brought in, some of which have worked. I mean, Mike Piazza worked here. He was a success. His number is in the rafters. Carlos Beltran, as much as it's debated among some, worked here. That was not a colossal failure. I think there's a debate about Johan Santana. Like, was that an overall success? I don't know. 3 days rest with a torn meniscus. It felt like one, but unfortunately the team went downhill. He had his injuries. We get it. I don't think there's any reason to believe this is going to fail. Now, we're going to debate this maybe a long time from now. How many good years do you need to make the contract worth it? If Juan Soto in the 9th year of this deal, and at that point he is 36 years old, just can't stay healthy, he's a DH who's struggling, can we look back at it and say, you know what, 9 of 15 were good? I think a lot of it depends on, do they win a championship? But I think you have to go in knowing, yeah, the 14th year isn't going to be great. That's okay. It's okay to understand that. And the other thing is, I was looking at the Met payroll situation. I was writing it down. I was going through all the guys on this roster and the money that they have committed. Right now, Francisco Lindor is signed for the next 6 years, 7 years, making $34 million a year. Juan Soto is obviously at $51 million a year. That's really it in terms of big, big money. That's it. I mean, you've got two monster deals, and that's it because, Jeff McNeil is signed for 2 more years. Brandon Nimmo is signed for a bunch more years, but remember, his AAV is not that high. It's only $20 million, which I do not think is this exorbitant number. Exorbitant, whatever. You know what I mean? A big-ass number. The rest of it, Kodai Senga is making $15 million a year for the next 3 years. They don't have a lot of committed monies, Hoff. And that's the other thing that I think we need to keep in mind. Yes, they just committed a boatload of money to Soto, but it's Soto and Lindor. The rest of it is either guys that are going to be free agents relatively soon, or in the case of Brandon Nimmo, making a reasonable, in my opinion, amount of money.
Right. And I think that's still the goal of bringing in David Stearns and bringing in all of the scouts and analytical departments that he's changed in the past year, is to have a really good farm system so that you don't have every single roster spot that's caught up in a $20+ million contract. Obviously, that's almost impossible to sustain, so that you need these young kids. But I think that's kind of the point. And I think that's kind of where we're going to land most of our pitching, to be fair.
Adam writes, with Soto's signing, are there more chips to trade? Guys, I appreciate the pod. Thanks for keeping it rolling all year round. I'm wondering what you think about the farm system now that we have an outfield spot taken for the next 15 years. Granted, he may not play the field for all of those years, but similar to us not having no use for a prospect at shortstop with Lindor, can the same be said for Soto in right field? If that's the case, do you think we have more chips to trade for someone like Crochet or another arm? Well, I think that right now, when you look at the Mets, left field is taken for the next 4 to 5 years with Brandon Nimmo. He's actually signed for 6 more years, but I'm being nice by saying, hey, 4 years, 5 years, there's your left field. Juan Soto is either the right fielder or a guy that ends up being a DH a lot of the time. So you got 2 outfield positions that I agree with Adam are pretty much on lockdown. First base, we're going to see. We're going to see if they re-sign Pete Alonso. We're going to see how many years it is. But for the sake of this, do you want to say they've re-signed Pete Alonso? Okay. Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez. You're really talking about 3 positions that are open in the future this year and beyond: second base, center field, and DH. I think that between Gilbert and Jet Williams and Ryan Clifford and Luis Angel Acuna and all the young players that they have, yeah, you probably feel more comfortable trading one of them or 2 of them for something else that can help you, especially a starting pitcher, considering David Stearns feels adverse to giving long-term contracts out to starters. I like the fact that second base and center field and even DH are open for a young player to step up and take it. So, yeah, I do think it's a fair point that depending on what's out there, I don't think you feel the need to just trade prospects, but depending on what's out there, yeah, I think you probably feel better equipped to trade position player prospects knowing that you've got spots on your roster. Now, let me get to Pete. I don't mean Hoffman. I mean Alonso. So we will go through what David Stearns said at the winter meetings. We'll do that on a Rico coming up in a few days. But he was asked about Pete Alonso, and specifically, do you have the wherewithal to re-sign him? Considering Juan Soto is about to get $765 million. And what David Stearns made clear was, yeah, this owner has shown we have a commitment and we have the funds to sign him. Which means if the Mets don't re-sign Pete Alonso, it will not be because of the budget. It will not be because of Juan Soto. It will be because whatever he was getting on the open market, the Mets looked at and said, yeah, we don't want to match that. Well, here's what I would warn David Stearns. Let's look at this Met lineup right now. Let's see what they've got. So right now, if I'm drawing out a lineup, and let's do it without Pete Alonso. Let's do it with a blank spot. Because if they lose Pete Alonso, I think logic would tell you they're going to add somebody. I don't think they're going to go into the start of the year with Brett Beatty at third base and Mark Vientos at first base. In fact, the words David Stearns used lead me to think that's not happening. He described Brett Beatty as a super utility guy, as a guy that's played second base and looked good, that can play the outfield. So I do not think for a second the Met game plan is Beatty at third, Vientos at first base. But here's your lineup as of right now. Lindor at shortstop leading off. Juan Soto batting second in right field. That's kind of cool to say, isn't it? Yeah. Mark Vientos batting third at third base. And then whoever your first baseman is or your third baseman, right? It's like kind of an open slot, but a cleanup hitter. Because I don't think anyone else on this roster is a clean. You think Brandon Nimmo's a cleanup hitter? Is Francisco Alvarez a cleanup hitter? Maybe someday, not yet. So they need that slugger to protect that third place hitter, to be that RBI producing machine. To me, that's perfect for Pete Alonso. But after you get through that cleanup spot, you've got Nimmo in left, Alvarez behind the plate. I think Iglesias or Acuna at second base to start. Maybe McNeil, though I have McNeil being traded. Marte and Beatty switching off at DH, which is exactly what I would do. And then Taylor, Jose Siri, Acuna, Gilbert in center. Like that lineup it needs Pete Alonso, quite frankly. Like if you take Alonso out of it, yeah, you got this top three that's amazing, but then it really falls off. I think Pete Alonso is the thing that keeps it really strong and really keeps that lineup dangerous. The Mets would be replacing Soto for Alonso, which I think we'd all agree is an offensive upgrade, but I think you'd still need more. So I look at that lineup, especially the way I lay it out, and say they need Pete Alonso. And if they lose Pete Alonso, okay, who are they getting, in your opinion, that's as good? I like Alex Bregman, and I don't think the Mets are really in on Alex Bregman. I'm just using him as an example, but Alex Bregman, Christian Walker on a short-term deal. Look, Pete Alonso plays. I love that about him. Christian Walker wasn't playing for a few months last year. So to me, and I don't know what his contract's going to look like, and obviously that's going to play a big role here. And sure, there's an emotion, there's a homegrown aspect to it, of course. I admit that. But from a baseball standpoint, this lineup feels very, very different if Pete Alonso is not in it, and not a good different. They need Pete Alonso to be that cleanup hitter.
No, I 100% agree. And that's why I've seen the lineup that you're talking about. I didn't get the feels because I feel like something's missing. And it's not because I'm in love with Pete Alonso, which I am. But it's just more, it really is like his bat makes that much difference. And when you have someone like Juan Soto and you can create just that depth in that, like we're talking about, there's a possibility if this offseason works out properly, Brandon Nimmo may be batting 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th.
You're so desperate for that, Pete. You you want that so badly.
But in this case, it's not even like, it's kind of like it makes more sense because if you have Lindor, Soto, Alonso, if Alvarez is in the top of the lineup, if Vientos is going to be in the top of the lineup, like it makes sense for him to be in the bottom of the lineup, and that's where I feel like last year, that was the one thing. We had some big hits from guys like Iglesias, but the expectation was they weren't going to. This lineup, I saw one from the Yankees from like I think 2000, whatever it was, where it was A-Rod, it was Bobby Abreu, and Jeter, and you name it. Like the entire thing was stacked. Like I got to be honest, if Alonso's back and you add one more big bat on top of that, or whatever the case is, you're talking about a legendary lineup.
Yeah, I don't even think they need to add Alonso and another bat. Like I'm good with Marte being the DH a lot of the time and Brett Beatty getting an opportunity and one of the kids stepping up and getting an opportunity. So I wouldn't even feel that desperate for it. I think what's going to be interesting and what could change that is the trade market. We talked about Brett Beatty's trade value, maybe Starling Marte's trade value, maybe Jeff McNeil, who we don't talk about as much here because we almost assume he's going to be moved. So that could change things. The other huge thing the Mets need to address is the starting pitching. And I'm going back and forth on what I need to feel good about this rotation. Look, the reality is no matter what the Mets do, besides signing Burns or Fried, which they're clearly not doing, even if they sign Sasaki, as great as that would be, the Mets are going to go into next year with major questions in their rotation. That's just the reality. Kodai Senga is a question. David Peterson building off of last year is a question. Clay Holmes converting into a starting pitcher is a massive question. Like, they're going to go in with questions. So what can they do if it's one more move in the rotation? I'd like for it to be two, but let's say it's one. Is Sean Manaea enough? Is re-signing Manaea to a 4-year, $100 million deal and going into the start of the year with a rotation of Manaea, Senga, Peterson, Holmes, and Montas enough? And look, they have a lot of depth guys. Paul Blackburn is still on this team. Jose Budo is still on this team. Tyler McGill is still on this team. And we haven't even mentioned the young prospects. So they actually have a decent amount of depth. I'm not worried about the depth. I'm worrying about the guy who can be a frontline guy. And so is Manaea enough? Is Walker Buehler a better option if they're only adding one guy? Is it Nate Eovaldi? You tell me, of the starting pitchers out there, not named Burns or Free, because it doesn't feel like they're going after either, who's the guy that would make you feel best about this rotation?
Oh, I think it would be Manaea. And the reason why I say Manaea, because I feel like they've unlocked something, but I don't want to. I don't know if I want to risk it again, because if it was just a half a season, then it's not good. But I feel like it's Sean Manaea.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards Walker Buehler. I do, and I know that there's a loyalty thing because we saw Manaea do it last year. But and by the way, both those guys have questions. Like, that's the reality that we have to almost accept, unless there's a trade we don't see coming, or they deep into the Burns-Fried market like we don't see coming. The Mets are going to go into the start of next year with major questions in their rotation. But we will spend more time on that over the next few days, especially as these winter meetings continue. We promised a podcast we have not gotten to based on all the Juan Soto news, and that is your trade ideas. We have a whole list of trade ideas that were sent in to us, some via Twitter, some on the email, thericob@gmail.com. And we do promise you at some point we'll go through those and kind of analyze which ones we would do and which ones make sense. Obviously, a lot of trades are being set up here at this winter meeting, and we'll see what they turn into. Also, we look forward to it. This will be during the holidays, the countdown of the 20 greatest home runs in the history of the New York Mets. But we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you downloading. We are going to try to Rico every night throughout these winter meetings, so we will give you a lot of content as we march through this part of the offseason, which now includes Juan Soto in the fold. You can email us anytime, thericob@gmail.com. Remember to rate, download, subscribe to Rico Brogna, wherever you download your podcasts, and we do appreciate you listening. Thank you very much for checking in on another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.